You may or may not have put words to it when you started your business, but starting a business and kind of betting on yourself in that way holds inherent risk. Risk that if you have a job or paycheck that's coming from someone else, you are avoiding. Now, that's not to say that working for someone else is a guarantee of any kind, right? Any of us can get fired at any time. The economy can change, all those different things. But when we're working for someone else, we're putting the responsibility of our paycheck on that person or that company. And we're separating that from ourselves in a way that can make us feel safer. Today, my conversation is with Rebecca Hunnicutt. And Rebecca and I have several things in common, not the least of which is that some number of years into our photography businesses, we got divorced and had to choose between going back to our safer careers. And again, lots of similarities here. She was also coming from a healthcare background, or doubling down on this bet that we had made on ourselves and trying to move forward, even in that new, even more vulnerable landscape. And I'm glad you're here to listen to this conversation today. And I hope you stick around, even if this has literally nothing to do with you or your business, because I actually think that these kinds of decisions and inflection points come to all of us who are in business for ourselves at some point or another. Whether you're getting divorced, whether the economy has taken a hit, whether some line in your business is not doing as well as you would like for it to, maybe you have some sort of health crisis. We all eventually face a situation that causes us to question whether we are able and willing to continue on down this path. And whatever that decision might lead to for you, I think that listening to people who have been in that position in the past talk about the factors that went into their decision helps make that process and that the things that you're thinking about a little clearer, a little less individual, and makes you potentially feel a little less alone. So with that, I am going to dive into our conversation. I know you're going to really enjoy hearing from Rebecca. Welcome to This Can't Be That Hard. My name is Anami Tonkin, and I help photographers run profitable, sustainable businesses that they love. Each week on the podcast, I cover simple, actionable strategies and systems that photographers at every level of experience can use to earn more money in a more sustainable way. Running a photography business doesn't have to be that hard. You can do it, and I can show you how. Rebecca Hunnicutt, welcome to This Can't Be That Hard. How are you doing today?
I'm so good, and I'm so happy to be here. This is one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, you say that to all the podcast hosts. I'm sure I appreciate it. I've been sort of savoring the anticipation of this conversation because you and I have a lot in common and a lot of sort of shared history, not together, but just sort of parallel lines. And it's funny because the more that I share my own story, the more I hear from other, in particular, women who've been through some similar situations, photographers who've had, the rug pulled out from under them and have had to kind of navigate that path. And I just think that it's a conversation that bears having and repeating and taking from all angles, because for a variety of reasons, many of us find ourselves at some point or another at a crossroads in our businesses. And that crossroads is really scary. So I just feel like hearing from people who've been through something similar and come out killing it on the other side is a good thing. But before I take it too far down that path, let me turn the microphone over to you and have you introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, so I am a lifestyle, children's, family, maternity, newborn photographer in Portland, Oregon. I also have, I was going to say burgeoning. I was like, where'd that vocabulary come from? A large school photography business. And so it's primarily preschools, but this year actually I'm starting with some elementary schools and high school. So that's really growing great. And then I also have an education arm of my business. So
nice.
Things are busy. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me dial your current bio back a couple of years. Why don't you give us a little bit of the backstory on how your business started and then how things changed for you?
Yeah. So similarly to you, I was in healthcare many years ago. That's my professional training as a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I was at a point after my first daughter was born where just managing that healthcare job was actually challenging. And we had an opportunity as a family to move overseas. And so, with that, I left healthcare, we moved overseas. And that's actually where the love for photography that I'd had as a kid, really, I was able to spend the time and fully learn. So I slowly grew a small photography business while living overseas as much as I could within the realities of being an expat and the legalities of that, and even started diving into the education back then. And that time off allowed me all those hours, right, to practice and learn my style and get all that kind of dialed in. And then it was about 6 years ago, we moved back to the US, and I was slowly starting to have a business here. And honestly, had my best month right when COVID happened, of course, right? And so I know it's like the age old story now for all of us. And so at that time, I chose just to step back because it wasn't required for our family. The laws in Oregon weren't super clear, but I tried to follow Washington's regulations, which were very strict because I felt like having some guidance was good. And then actually my school business started during COVID because I offered school portraits in a tent in my driveway.
Sure.
And, that kind of started in Portland from here. But then about 2 years ago, I got divorced. And that's really where the crossroads occurred for me to need to decide, am I returning to healthcare again, or am I making this business more than full time? There was a lot of soul searching and talking and thinking and all of that. And for me, I was looking at a lifestyle where my kids had me, basically stay at home, right, all that time. And I was concerned about switching to healthcare where you're no longer in charge of your life anymore.
Yep.
And I would say you don't have emotional capacity for much else from the jobs that I'd had.
Right.
So you use it at work and you come home and there's nothing left. And I was like, I don't want to have nothing left for my kids. And so I was like, I'm going to go all in. I've already been working on this business. I want this business and I want the lifestyle that it would provide me. And also within that, I saw personally the earning potential was greater as an entrepreneur than it would be returning to my healthcare job where you get your 1% raise every year. So for those of you who are in industry, it's different, but not photography industry, just industry in general. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? While I have this window, I'm going for it and betting on myself, and I'm going to, do this for me and my girls. So that's kind of how we got to where I am today.
So at the time that you were kind of at this crossroads, how long had your business been in place in the States?
So, legally the whole time, but, I had that license the whole time, but it was definitely a part-time endeavor. And, because of COVID thrown in there, it was a longer part-time endeavor than I'd wanted it to be, but it was definitely still part-time when I transitioned to being like, this is it. This is going to be how I support myself. 100%.
Yeah. I actually have, as many listeners know, I have a similar story, had been in business, got divorced, had a healthcare background, was sort of at this, do I go back to my nursing job? Do I continue to pursue this? But in some ways, my decision was easier. I had let my nursing license lapse. Actually, I think I had officially at that point retired from nursing because you have to sign the paperwork to say, I'm not trying to maintain my license. And so it would have been a bunch of hoops to jump through to get that reinstated. But I had also been running a full-time business at that point for 7 years. So I had a little bit more ground underneath me. I had, more financial data, more everything else. It was a major shift for sure, going from 2 incomes to 1. But I had a little bit more to go on. It's there's 2 different pieces to that equation, right? There's the emotional piece, are you willing to trade the certainty of a guaranteed paycheck, whatever guaranteed means? Obviously we can lose our jobs and stuff, but a guaranteed paycheck and benefits and all that sort of stuff. But with it comes the, you don't control your time. You are emotionally embroiled in a bunch of stuff that you then have to turn off and compartmentalize when you come home, versus running a business that lights you up, that sets its own set of examples, but does not have the guaranteed paycheck.
Yeah. And so I actually still have a license.
Good.
So I'm retired, but not
smarter.
Retired. Well, I may have let one of them accidentally lapse in the last year with being super busy, but But I did still have my license. The state of Oregon's pretty strict, so they have work hour requirements. So I'd actually need to drive up to Washington to work. So that was a piece of it as well. But for me, I was really looking long term. Of course, getting the quick nursing job could have happened. But for me, I was like, that's not what I want to do, through retirement. And I had dreams, right? I was like, I want to travel. I want to be able to stay in my house. I want to be able to go volunteer on Halloween, all those things that you can't do in certain circumstances. And so I just decided to go for it. And it was kind of risky, because I didn't have that 7-year history of a full-time gig, but I felt like I had enough support, within the industry and mentorships and, other photographer friends that I was like, I'm going to do this. So I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, I do actually feel like that's the harder part, is convincing ourselves and being willing to make the leap of faith, because I don't care how many years you've been in business and how much, whatever. I mean, it is a risk, and being the boss, even if you're not at a major crossroads in your life, carries with it the risk of failure, and then of having to scramble to figure something else out. But I think that if we are willing to be comfortable with that risk kind of always walking beside us, the payoff can be pretty magical.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really, there was this transition place, right, in my life, but also, it's funny, when I looked back, I was like, oh, I was taking pictures, at the age of 8. I worked at a 1-hour photo. I worked at a portrait studio. So for me, it wasn't that I took this random interest, out of thin air and I was like, I'm going to do this. It basically had been percolating my entire life and was on a slow build. And it just, everything came together to really, accelerate and dive in. And for me, the schools are kind of the foundation of my, what I call consistent income.
Yep.
And then the other stuff's a little bit less predictable, but
yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, once you made this decision and you were like, okay, I'm doing this. What did you do? What was sort of your plan in order to be as secure as you could be in that position of sort of inherent vulnerability?
Yeah. So I actually worked with a financial coach, and I thought, it was good from all angles, right? So personally financials and also business financials. And so she really helped me to set up the foundation that I think gave me the confidence, which was within basically paying myself regularly. And so by paying myself regularly, it no longer was a hobby that gives you fun money or whatnot. It was right. This is my job. And I think just that small change, actually, I was amazed at how it even changed my own approach and my own feelings about my business, because I am paying myself regularly. So I think that was a huge piece. And what can be hard, right, with the seasonality of our work is paying yourself regularly when you don't make the same amount of money every month.
Right.
And so the financial coach helped me come up with a plan for how to do that, right? So how much can you safely pay yourself every month? What could your expenses be? And then within that, how do you change it or grow, based on all of your different circumstances? And so for the first year of doing that, I paid myself basically the 1st and the 15th, and it was the same amount. And then I was actually able to save money last year based on total taxes and whatnot. And so have then been able to increase what I'm paying myself as well. And so I just think that stable paycheck, regardless of if I have 1 family session or 15 family sessions, really makes a difference in me feeling comfortable and not being stressed. Yeah. And then I also implemented, just for last year, the revenue on repeat, that you do. And so it's great, because that's something I can count on every month. So in addition to what I'm paying myself, there is that consistent income piece coming in as well. So I took out the scary, what if I don't get enough work piece? Because I know in January, the work is not the same. Right. I mean, it's the math, always maths for all of us. January is not the same. So I guess unless you're a branding photographer and everyone's like, oh, it's January, I need new pictures. Their January is probably not our January. But for me, I know January, February, March, super slow. So I have to prepare for that. And coming up with that plan, was really empowering. And then I've stuck with it, and then have plans for how to grow as my business grows, how to pay myself, a different wage as well.
Obviously it's all fine and good to pay yourself a salary. And that does create this sort of mental sense of okay, this is how much money that I have each month to work with, But there's the piece of it where the money has to come in order to be able to cover that salary payment. What did she advise, or what did you guys work together to set up in order to give yourself as much insurance that you would be able to cover that each month?
Yeah, I mean, so we really took a deep dive on all of my expenses, both personal and business. And, you know, how much does it actually cost to live in Portland, Oregon and eat and have 2 kids, you know, and to be real. And so with my divorce, I had some cushion. So I think that helped, but really, you know, we were just real. And so even like with my revenue on repeat income basically is like, that pays my health insurance. But I know it's like, okay, I don't have to worry. My health insurance is paid through this, you know? So kind of identifying where things are coming from, where they're going, how it's going to happen, and really just laying out a plan. And I was very strict, like about taking out my 30% to save for taxes. And because of that, that's how I was able to like increase what I paid myself for this year, because there was enough to cover the entire year. So just really laying out strict guidelines of how I was going to do everything. And I will fully admit, because people are probably listening to this thinking, wow, she follows a budget all the time. I am not on a strict budget.
Yeah.
But I put these pieces were strict, right? So that I could then work from there. I kind of function personally, you know, there's a lot of money mindset in general, right? That we all have money things, money issues, money history. I personally function under like a very optimistic money outlook, which is, I think it's funny, and I don't know where it came from, but that it will work out. Like, I feel very much like it will work out. And so, I mean, and to be honest, I have 2 teenage girls. They're very into Taylor Swift, as many other people are in the world.
Sure.
And it came up that we could go to Austria this weekend and see her concert, and we're doing it because I just have this optimistic outlook. Like it'll work out. Like I'm cool with it. Yeah. It can be scary, right? As you use your credit card, but then also I'm like, no, but I'm doing this. Like, I know I can pay myself. I know I can do it. I have a positive outlook, and, you know, I'm like, okay, I'll pick up some more schools to cover it. So, you know, but having that freedom to make that choice for myself and my kids and to do it, like, that's part of what having my own business gives me. You know, I didn't have to go to some person and be like, can I have permission to leave?
To take time
or
off.
Travel. And for our history of living overseas and everything, travel's a value and something important that I hold and want to be able to do. And so, you know, I just use my optimism and I'm going for it.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I always, you know, I get nervous having a podcast. There is this like baked in sense of responsibility, or at least I take it this way, where I'm like, I don't want to tell somebody like, just swing for the fences and, you know, see what happens, because there are real world potential consequences when we make financial leaps of faith or any other kind. Emotional, financial, all kinds of implications. But with that said, I think that to be a business owner, you have to have a certain amount of optimism. I mean, even just to open your doors, there was an element of betting on yourself that doesn't sit right with everyone. And for those people, you know, that's the reason that there are employee jobs and W-2 jobs out there. Like, that's not a bad thing. It's just something that we have to know about ourselves. And I do tend to think that within our own creative businesses, and if we are willing to be creative and think outside the box and keep trying, you can create the income when you need it. The sort of doubt and pessimism that starts to creep in when you have that sense of sort of scarcity, when that scarcity mindset takes over, it can be such a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of a thing.
Yeah. And so for me, I definitely felt like having the positive outlook does impact it, right? So I can make my choices from a different space as opposed to the scarcity panic space. And, you know, so I do think that's part of it. And I am real. Like I said, I still have that nursing license. It's like my emergency parachute in my back pocket. And maybe that also helps because I know, like, you know, I'm not going to have to go be a barista somewhere. So, which I'm probably not qualified for anyway. Seriously.
You want coffee from the pot? I can help you. Otherwise.
I guess I could be a babysitter. I don't know. I don't know what I could do, what else I could do other than this. So I don't know. I think it is hard because everyone's circumstances are different. And of course, I would hate for someone to be like, I'm going to bet on myself. And the next month they're like, oh, I have to live in my car. I mean, I do want there to be some practical sense of what to do. And so for me, by using the financial advisor, right, like we laid out a plan And that gave me the confidence to be like, okay, I can do this. Here's the framework. Here's how I'm going to get through this, next phase.
Right.
And, I've heard from other photography colleagues, some people who did have a regular job, and they're like, okay, so I'm going to get to the place in my business where I can match, which I think is similarly like what you had done, right? So I'll match my income before I will, leave that W-2 job. And so, I think there are some ways to plan it out, but it's definitely not something you can just be like willy-nilly. Like there's intention, coordination, planning, and a positive mindset. Yeah. Savings.
I'm going to toss savings into there.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And then also not getting into sticky situations, right, as much as possible. Right. So even I was telling someone how I saved, all this tax money, and they were like, "You did?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Aren't you nervous, like what your tax liability will be for the year?" And I was like, "No, I want to know how much of that I can have back." Right. It's like, I'm prepared, I'm prepared, but I want it back now. Yeah. And so really sticking to like the
rules that you've laid out for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Even when we don't, or maybe especially if you don't have a boss, you really have to step into that boss role for yourself and say, nope, this money goes away. We're not going to touch it. That's the rule, which feels silly at times and then is a giant relief at other times. I also met with a financial advisor in the wake of my separation and getting divorced process. And it was a very humbling meeting because it was one of those where I sort of thought that I was doing a lot of things right. He put me in my place about that. There were a lot of things that needed to be done in addition. And basically it was like, you're not saving enough. This is not going to sustain you in the long term. Like you're fine right now, month to month, but what happens when you need to retire? And so that really lit a fire under me. I had all kinds of fires lit under me in that season of life. But his thing was you need to cut down your spending. And I'm actually not like a spendy person. I spend money on certain things. And like you, I like to travel and I do like to go out to eat. But other than that, it's, I'm a pretty frugal person overall. And so I was like, so let's look at because at that point I was not traveling and going out to eat. And he was like, let's try and cut 40% from your budget. And I was like, I don't know how 40% drops out of my budget. So I took that as great. So how do I make more money?
Yeah.
Because we can reduce the bottom line only so much, but the top line as a business owner, that I have more control over. So one of the things that it seems you did, as I did, was to kind of add additional streams of revenue, diversify the portfolio of what you were doing. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for me, with this transition and just generally, I didn't want to be fully stuck in the super seasonal income. And so there were multiple steps that I took. So, I call them like 3 buckets under my umbrella of my business. So, so I have the portrait side, which definitely is seasonal. But for that, I approached it as like, okay, I'm going to talk to my clients about what we can do so this isn't seasonal from the portrait side of my business. So, with SEO and blogging, I really went into like, oh, hey, let's do in-home sessions in January, February, March, but so really pushing and talking a lot about how like, it's not just about fall. So a lot of things about that, like it doesn't have to be fall. And do you want orange leaves on your walls anyway? Like, so really just leaning, orange is not my color personally. But so just leaning into trying to educate all my clients on how to make that not be a seasonal piece of my business. Of course, with the schools, school schedules are what school schedules are. I'm not going to be able to change that in society. And of course, schools need pictures at the beginning of the year, right? So I know that like that is seasonal, but then I give myself space in the quieter times. That's when I prepare for that busy part of the year. Right. And then try to also have some schools, like smaller preschools or like in-home preschools that do spring photos instead. So I'm always pushing like, hey, I think for your needs, spring could work out, so that I'm trying to like, spread it out a little bit during the year. And one thing I really love about that is, since I've done it for a couple seasons, I have averages per school. So like I have an expectation with a certain size school about how much I'll make. So that gives me some comfort, right, of what will happen from that space. And then that in itself turned into basically my funnel for my family business as well. So it's still developing and growing, but I can see that change happening. It's slow, but it's there, where now those preschool families are becoming family clients. And so that's kind of feeding that other bucket. And then from the education side of things, I had my color and composition course for a while, revamped it last year, and have been working on relaunching it, and actually just educating myself on how you sell education.
Yeah.
Which is like a whole, oh yeah, it's like a whole thing that I didn't know anything actually about. And so I've been doing a lot of learning on how to sell my courses. And, within those 3 buckets, there are things that are consistent, right? And I think, which is what makes them stronger. So, like really at heart, I'm a children's photographer, right? Kids are in families, so that feeds that piece. And then within education, like I'm working on, I have a kids camp that I run, and trying to branch out and then make that an opportunity for other photographers to run a kids camp, or if kids, for example, who might be in homeschools or don't live in Portland, but are interested in the class, that they could do it online. So, but that all comes from loving working with kids, right? So those pieces kind of, translate together. And so by having these 3 buckets, basically, like I'm never not without a really long to-do list. There's always stuff to do. And then I'm able to plug in with the seasonality of the work, when to work on the different things to try to grow them.
One of the things that I have found really great about diversifying my portfolio of offerings, we'll call it.
Not your buckets.
I'm a family photographer, but now I also have education and the podcast. Obviously, there's like the financial piece was the thing that first inspired it. Like, yes, I could use more. If one thing starts to fail, is this other thing still afloat? Yeah. Or if there's, some sort of thing that I don't have control over that shuts one of them down, do I have something to back that up? So that was the first consideration. But the thing that I've found has been so wonderful for me, I have always had sort of short attention span disorder when it comes to work. Photography has held my love and interest for the longest of anything in my entire life by far. But I feel like most creatives that I am friends with and that I talk to, they're really attracted to a thing, but they get bored if they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. It was one of the things that I liked about nursing, actually, was that every day I went in and my job was totally different. And so bringing that into my photography world, where it's like different clients or students or, customers, whatever you want to call them, like that I'm thinking of, like, how do I serve that person? How do I market to that person? What can I try in this sphere? And so I find that it has scratched an itch, a creative itch that I didn't even know was there until I started to round things out. And it's something that, there's a bunch of different ways that you can round your business out and add income streams. Education is not by any stretch the one and only, but I feel like doing that once you've got your feet under you as a photographer is something that I would recommend to anyone.
Yeah, well, because it really makes you analyze what you're doing yourself, right? So even, I keep referencing the kids camp, but that's because I just had one. So those little, I say little, they're not little, they're like mostly middle schoolers, but kind of our week is top of mind. And even like, how much as adults, right, with responsibilities, how much time do we allow ourselves to play, right? And so I don't even mean play like go on holiday. Play like, oh, let's see, I have a camera and I have colorful scarves and it's sunny. Like, what can we do? And so just that mind shift to be like, let's play, let's see what happens. And so, in my business, that's also like, let's make some Facebook ads and follow the course I took and then see what happens, and like get in Canva and have fun in there making ads, and it's like, oh, this is fun, right? But it gives you a nice way to be creative in different spaces, and also to be creative at times where maybe you can't be outside, right? If you photograph outside, or I can do work when my kids are at school, and, if that's, a priority to not be working just every evening, which has been really great. And there are lots of different ways that we can take our skills that we've grown and help other people. And, at different points, I actually did copywriting for somebody, which kind of makes me laugh because I'm not as wordsmithy like as you're a wordsmith, but this was a person who English was their second language. So they were like, I need help. Right. And so I was able to really, help them in their business in that space, or doing, social media work, like, hey, you have blogs, but you don't post on social media. Like, I can help you reuse and recycle your content, set it up and later, like, so we have a lot of skills that can be outside of the strict offering of selling courses, to use everything that we do that I think we forget we even do, right?
Yeah.
But I really love those memes, right, that come out and where the photographers like puts on their 50 different hats basically, or their 50 different job titles, but it's so true. And I think leading into like, what are your skills and what do you like? And then how can you use that to, you know, cover yourself during the slow times can be really key.
Yeah. And there's so many different opportunities out there with, you know, things like Upwork or Fiverr. And even if you're just earning a couple $100 here and there, it can fill in the gaps. It just requires like making it happen, getting yourself out there. I want to kind of wrap things up with a question that has been building over the course of our conversation. You mentioned that you've got these teenage daughters. I think one of the big things for me, my kids were younger when I got divorced and they're boys. So it's maybe a little different. I don't know, but
patriarchy, you know.
But yeah, right. They were like, I'm not looking at you as but of course we are a role model, even if we don't have kids to people. Yeah. And I think that ultimately factored into my decision a little bit. There was this defiance of like, I've built this business. I want to show in my situation, my kids, you know, that I didn't just kind of give up and run back to safety immediately. I'm still following my dreams. Did that factor into it at all for you? And have you had any conversations with your daughters about this?
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. To be honest, in the like stressful part of it, I didn't think about it because it was a little bit like, how do we just get through where we're at?
Right.
But we have had conversations about this, and I find it so amazing. And it didn't take a long time either for them to acknowledge this. So the initial conversation we had was funny. I was asking them, I don't know why, they were describing another mom that they knew. And then I was like, well, how would you describe me? Right. And I was like, this could go really wrong. I mean, my kids are 11 and 13. And if you know 13-year-old girls, this could go so many different directions. And they actually used like an expletive without using an expletive, but they basically told me, oh, I would say you're a kick A businesswoman. And I was like, they blew my mind. Like, I was so happy. Like, that's how they literally went to it. They were like, no, you work super hard and you're growing a business and you're doing what you want to do. And I was like, oh, this made me so happy. It really did. And I'm showing them that, you know, all those things, right? That like by betting on myself, looking at my dreams, making a choice and going for it, it's possible. Yeah. And, you know, I do sometimes hold on to, like, I went to the University of Michigan, and anyone who went to the University of Michigan, we all have a lot of pride over our alumni status, but, you know, and I want them to go to college and all these things. So sometimes I'm like, go to college, but then you can be an entrepreneur afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, but my younger one's like, I'm going to be a hairstylist, but I'm going to own my own salon. Right. Yeah. So like, she's already gone past the, like, I'm just gonna be a hairstylist. She's like starting an empire. She's also gonna have a cheese tasting room in her hair salon. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out.
I get regular haircuts and love cheese. So
yeah. So this is, I mean, she's 11 and she's already like, oh, I know how I'm going to make it myself stand out right from the competition.
Oh my gosh.
So it really did. It has impacted them, and it's shown them like one's interested in architecture, and it's not just I could become an architect. It's like, oh, I could have a firm of female architects, you know? So it's really has taken it next level, and which I think makes me most proud.
Okay. So Rebecca, this has been such a lovely conversation. I imagine there are going to be a lot of people out there who want to connect with you, hear more, maybe poke around your website a bit and see a little bit of how you talk about all the different things that you do. And I know you've got some amazing resources for photographers as well under your education bucket, under your umbrella. So let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, so my website is Hunnicutt Photography, which is HUNNICUTT. And you can go to hunnicuttphotography.com/resources. And you can see I have like a free online webinar about composition, a downloadable PDF, and then you can kind of check out all my buckets, I guess.
Yeah.
My colorful buckets. They're colorful.
I was going to say, your website is so beautiful. It's a fun kind of mashup of things, and I feel like you do it really well. So that's always something that I like to go snoop about. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll have you back again another time to chat about one of those other buckets. But this has been, I love connecting with people who kind of weathered similar storms, and I appreciate you being willing to share.
Yes, of course. Honestly, your podcast, you honestly are often talking directly to me is how I feel when I listen to it. And so I really hope that the two of us together have been able to, help others to see like you're not alone. All of your circumstances, even though they can be different, there are lots of paths forward, and get a financial coach if you need one, which neither of us are, but we're obviously we're propping them today. Yeah. And a mentor and go for it.
Have a great day, and I will see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of This Can't Be That Hard. I'll be back same time, same place next week. In the meantime, you can find more information about this episode, along with all the relevant links, notes, and downloads at thiscan'tbethathard.com/learn. If you like the podcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Even better, share the love by leaving a review in iTunes. And as always, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic week.